So let's talk about improv. This is something that a lot of people have trouble with, and I think there's really two reasons for that. One is that it's just kind of intimidating. If you spend weeks practicing a song before you can play it well, how are you supposed to just sit down and create a song on the fly, just like that? And then the second problem is that even once you do start improvising, a lot of times you wind up doing the same thing over and over. It's so open-ended, you can do whatever you want, that it's sometimes hard to know, like, what's the next step? How do you progress and get better at improvising? So I want to try to tackle this in two parts. It'll be this video, where I'll kind of do the high-level stuff, like how do you approach improvising? What are you supposed to think about? How do you get better at it? And then the next video will be more like the little stuff, like how do you take a scale and get a melody out of that? How do you shape that melody? How do you keep it interesting? That sort of thing. So we will start with a very simple example. This is something that I might do if I just sat down to work on my improvising. So I'm going to take a C minor 7 chord, which is a very simple chord. Looks just like that. And I'm going to kind of set up this framework for myself, okay? So I'm going to say that, I'm going to play this sort of back and forth rhythm. That sort of thing, almost like eighth notes in 4/4. And I'm going to play, these two notes with this hand and these two notes with this hand. So, sort of like that. And then I'm going to have some rules here. So I'm never going to change the rhythm while I do this. I'm never going to change the chord, so only a C minor 7 chord. And I'm not even going to double any notes. I'm going to make sure that I'm always playing, these 4 notes exactly. All I'm going to do is just kind of move them around the keys. So I'll play around with this for like 20 or 30 seconds just to give you an idea. So it might sound something like this. Okay, so obviously that's very simple, but it's a good start. That is working. I'm able to take that and I'm able to improvise with it. So let's talk about what improv actually is and what you're trying to do here. Now, you might think that improvising would be a lot like writing a song. You're going to be taking notes and chords and trying to create music out of it. But actually, the process is completely different. When you're writing a song, your goal is to create good music eventually. But the process, actually getting there is totally messy. You might have an idea and try it and it doesn't work and you back up and try again. And it could take you hours before you have even a few seconds of good music. Whereas when you're improvising, you want the music to sound good right now. Like if you imagine yourself, sitting down at a coffee shop and you're going to entertain everybody for half an hour, you want the music to sound good, from the second you sit down to the second you get up. You can't start and stop halfway through and, do all that stuff. So in practice, that means a few things. For one, when you're improvising, the music needs to be continuous. You can't start and stop and do all that. It also, I'm going to say, it needs to sound not horrible. Like, you don't want to throw something out that, sounds really bad. Whereas when you're writing a song, you can try whatever you want to. Like, who cares if it doesn't sound good? You'll just change it. For example, like if I'm, playing this thing again and I decided to try, this chord, like, that's probably not what I want. Now, to be fair, if I know what I'm doing, I could probably make that work. Like, I could probably, resolve that tension, or do something with it. But, the point is, like, I don't just want to throw things out there and hope they work. I need to know how they're going to sound and how to handle them. And then, everything, well, I'll say not horrible. And then everything has to happen in real time. Meaning, like, if I have this idea, like, hey, I could do a key change, if I don't know how to do that in the moment while I'm playing, that's not going to happen. Whereas when I'm songwriting, I can take all the time I want to figure that out. So, happens in real time. And then lastly, I have to be able to play everything I do. Like if I have this idea to do some crazy, 5-octave 16th note arpeggio thing, that might work when I'm composing a song, but like if I can't do that right now, first try, it's not going to happen. So it needs to be playable. So basically, like, that's what you're looking for when you're improvising. You're trying to accomplish these things. Whereas when you're writing a song, you don't care. Like, you don't care if the music's continuous, you don't care if you throw out some awful chord, you don't care if you can't do things in real time, and you don't even care if you write stuff that you can't play, because the end result is all that matters, and you can spend weeks practicing that song if you want to. Here's a good way, I think, to visualize this. Imagine this sort of space that represents... Make sure I can fit this in. Okay. Imagine this space that represents everything you can do musically. Right? Say that this line represents harmony. And like right here at the beginning is really simple stuff, like, not even chords, just say like, 2 notes at the same time, like an interval. And then like as you get farther out, there's, say a complete chord, and then, maybe a chord progression, like maybe some of the really simple ones, like 1, 4, 5. And then harder things like, more complicated progressions, and then modes, and key changes. There could be things like microtonal music, or just really experimental stuff. And if you get far enough out there, there's just like, what would happen if I played the piano with my face? Or what would happen if I dropped cats into a bathtub full of ice water? Or whatever, just like the weirdest things that you can think of. Cats. And then, this axis could be rhythm, and you could say, like, this is really basic stuff, like whole notes and 4/4, and then, maybe slightly more complicated rhythms, or compound time, or syncopation. Or there could be polyrhythms, or, whatever. And there'd be other axes too. There'd be like orchestration and song form and texture, and like there's lots of different, things that you can do. But the point is, you could kind of draw this line around the stuff at the beginning here. And you could say that like these things I'm very comfortable with. I understand these. I know what they're going to sound like. If I play it, I know what to expect. And then as you get kind of outside of that line, it's more the experimental area. I don't exactly know what this is going to sound like. I don't fully understand it. I don't know that I can play it instantly. And when you're songwriting, you can wander through this space at your leisure. Throw cats in a bathtub. See what it sounds like. Do whatever you want, because if it sounds bad, who cares? You're just going to eventually find something that sounds good. Now, fair warning, I did actually mention the term face piano once to a 6-year-old. And she promptly smashed her face on the keys and injured her nose. And that was really hard to explain to her mom. So, exercise some restraint when you're doing these things. But point being, when you're songwriting, you can do whatever you like. But when you're improvising, you're actually going to kind of stay within this bubble. You're going to do things that you can do, that you understand, and you know what they're going to sound like. Now, in reality, the bubbles, your knowledge of music isn't perfectly geometric. So it's more like, I understand, this progression in this certain key, and I know this rhythm if I'm doing this thing, and I know this particular arpeggio or whatever. So it's more like this sort of, field of bubbles, I guess. But the idea is the same. Like, you're going to be inside of these safe places when you're improvising. So that's the reason why I chose to play, what I did, like with the C major 7 chord and this, 8th notes and 4/4 rhythm and all that stuff. Like, all of those things were inside my bubble. Like, I know what they sound like, I'm very comfortable with them, and I can use that, in real time to do improvising. If I had decided to do like some wild 16th note runs modulating keys every 2 beats, like, I could not have pulled that off, and that would not have worked for improvising. I could do a song that way, I could write something, but I can't improvise like that. Now, obviously, as you work on your improvising, you're going to start with, a very small bubble, but half the point is to, expand that and be able to do, more and more. And you should actually, feel this expanding and yourself being able to do more things, the more you work on your improv. Now, there's one other, kind of core idea you have to wrap your head around. If you've never watched the show Whose Line Is It Anyway? You should, because it's an amazing show, and it's a fantastic example of improv. Now, it's comedic improv, but it's fundamentally the same thing. The idea of the show is that they have these comedians and they, have them up on stage, and there's no script to the show. They just kind of, make up jokes and just kind of do funny things, and they're just improvised comedy. But what you'll notice is that at no point in all 200 episodes do they ever just put these guys up on stage and say, okay, tell jokes. Every single part of the show starts with some idea or some scenario. They might have okay, Colin is at a party, but he's slowly turning into a parrot. Or, Ryan is on a dating show, but he's going through all the stages of drunkenness. Or, whatever crazy idea, they always give them something to work from and kind of like a seed idea. The same thing happens when you're trying to improvise musically. You can't just sit down and create something out of nothing. You have to have an idea to start from. And this is actually why a lot of people get stuck with their improv. Without realizing it, they're actually starting from the same idea every time. You think you're sitting down to just kind of play whatever comes to your head, but really your fingers are kind of, finding the same chords every time, and it always kind of turns out the same way. So you have to be very conscious of what idea are you starting from. And your idea needs to be what I'd call fully baked. What I started with here, this C minor 7, if I just said, I'm going to improvise with a C minor 7 chord, that's not enough to really do anything with. I need at least a rhythm so I have, some kind of movement, but really I want to give myself some kind of framework or some sense of how I'm going to improvise this and how I'm going to change things and turn it into, a complete piece of music. So that's kind of the other big thing, is have an idea, and make sure it fits inside that bubble, something you can do, but make sure you have an idea, make sure it's fully baked, and make sure you change ideas sometimes. So you might want to start with some really simple ideas, play the note D in your left hand over and over, and then with your right hand, play notes from a D minor chord. And, see how far you can take that. But, make sure it's simple enough so that you can achieve, these things, and then try to slowly expand. Now, if you take, either your own idea or, this example I gave you earlier, and you actually try this, you're going to notice a few things. First, this is way more difficult than you might expect. Like I said, doing things in real time is a totally different ballgame than doing them, kind of at your leisure while you're writing a song. So just, expect this to take a lot more practice than you might think. Second is that this is going to feel super restrictive. Like what I was doing here, I'm literally playing one chord, one rhythm, and I'm limiting myself in just about every way I could. And your instinct is going to be to try to get beyond that as soon as you can. You think, okay, I need to learn how to change chords, and I should be doing other stuff. And it's as soon as you're comfortable, you're going to try to move on. But actually, you want to do the opposite. You want to stay on this for as long as you can. I remember when I was in college, my composition professor had us do this little exercise. At some point in class, he said, okay, I want you to take out a piece of paper and, come up with as many different ways to play two notes as you can. And I'll be back in 20 minutes. And, my thought was, are you kidding me? That's going to take me 10 seconds. You're just being lazy. You want to go take a nap in your office. So you start thinking okay, I could play these two notes together. I could play this one and then that one, or that one and this one. I guess I could do a pedal tone, and then do some kind of melody in the top note. I could do a 2/3 polyrhythm. I guess that's 3/2, whatever. But 20 minutes later, it comes in and it's what? I'm not done. I'm only 3 pages into this. you start thinking about an orchestra and what you could do with strings and whatever. The point being, something that seems simple at the outset, like there are actually a near infinite number of possibilities. And all the really cool stuff, it's like out there on the edges. It's the stuff that you don't think about right away. So, something as simple as just, this that I was doing, think about like using the full range of the piano and like taking dynamics as far as you can take them, just being incredibly loud and soft and just moving things around and coming up with whatever you can. And once you feel like you've really explored that idea, or you have been able to be creative and come up with new things, then start looking at going to the next thing. And of course you will want to do that eventually. You might start using an F minor 7 chord and doing, or whatever. But fully explore these things and be super super patient with it. So anyway, that's kind of the big picture, and I think a pretty good place to start from. Next video, I'll look at actually taking chords and a scale and how to create melodies and things out of a scale. But in the meantime, leave questions and comments. Check out my Patreon page if you want to support the channel, and I will see you in the next video.